I remember the exact sound the trash bags made when I walked into the hallway that Tuesday afternoon. A heavy plastic crinkle. The kind of sound that means something is being thrown away that should never be thrown away. I had just returned from my weekly visit to the cemetery where my wife, Rose, was buried. I did that every Tuesday. I would bring fresh flowers, stay for 20 minutes, and talk to her the way I always had, quietly, honestly, like she was still sitting across the kitchen table from me. We had been married for 31 years. She had been gone for 2. When I stepped through the front door of my house, I stopped cold. In the hallway, just outside the guest bedroom, sat 3 large black trash bags and a pile of boxes. And on top of that pile, unmistakable, was the small oak jewelry box with the brass latch. Rose's jewelry box. The one that had sat on her dresser since before we were married. The one I had never once opened since she passed, because even looking at it made my chest go hollow. My hands began to shake. My daughter-in-law, Claire, appeared from the guest bedroom doorway with another box under her arm and an expression I can only describe as satisfied. "Oh, good, you're back," she said, barely glancing at me. "I'm almost done clearing this room." I stood there staring at Rose's jewelry box, sitting on top of a trash pile, and could not form a single word. I crossed the hallway in 4 steps and picked up the jewelry box before anything else. My fingers pressed into the familiar worn edges of the wood. Rose had bought it at a small antique shop in the town where she grew up. She showed it to me the day after we got engaged, laughing because she said she had bought it years before meeting me, like she had been saving it for the right time. "What is this doing out here?" My voice came out lower and steadier than I expected. Claire set her box down and folded her arms. "It was collecting dust in the back of a closet. I figured it was old stuff." "It is not old stuff. It belonged to Rose." She tilted her head. "Everything in that closet belonged to Rose. But Michael and I need this room, and someone has to make decisions." That word, decisions, landed like a slap, as if clearing out my late wife's belongings was simply a matter of practical management. My son Michael appeared from the kitchen doorway. He looked between his wife and me and did what he had been doing more and more lately. He said nothing. He stood with his hands in his pockets, glancing at Claire the way someone checks the weather before deciding how to act. "Michael," I said, "did you know about this?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "She was just organizing, Dad. Nobody was trying to." "There are trash bags in the hallway," I said firmly. He looked at the bags, then at Claire. She gave a small, unbothered shrug that meant everything. I took the jewelry box to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I did not open it immediately. I held it the way you hold something fragile after it has almost been broken. After a few minutes, I unlatched the brass clasp and lifted the lid. Some pieces were still there. The small pearl earrings Rose wore to our son's christening. A thin gold bangle her mother had given her. A coral brooch she called ugly, but never threw away because it came from her grandmother. But certain spaces were empty. Spaces that should not have been empty. I knew exactly what was missing. The sapphire pendant I had given her on our 10th anniversary. The antique cameo ring she had inherited from her aunt. And one more, a necklace she kept wrapped separately at the bottom of the box, a piece she always called the old one. I closed the lid. Then I walked back to the hallway, knelt down, and began untying the first trash bag, sorting through folded scarves and a broken picture frame. That was when I found it. A cream-colored envelope buried near the bottom, thick paper, with a gold-embossed logo in the upper corner. The name read, Harland & Wick, Fine Jewelry Appraisers and Estate Consultants. I looked at it for only 1 second. Then I slipped it quietly into my shirt pocket and said absolutely nothing. That evening, after Michael and Claire left, I sat alone in my study. Rose had always called it my cave, a small room lined with bookshelves and smelling permanently of the cedar oil I used on the desk. She used to knock twice before entering, even after 30 years of marriage. A small joke between us that I never explained to anyone else. I set the jewelry box on the desk and opened it again, slowly. The coral brooch, the pearl earrings, the gold bangle, and the empty spaces between them, like missing teeth. I thought about the year Rose was diagnosed. How she had spent 2 quiet afternoons going through her belongings, not morbidly, but practically. The way she did everything. She had told me once, "I want people to know what things meant, not just what they were worth." She had kept a small notebook describing each piece, where it came from, why she loved it, who she hoped would carry it forward. I had not looked at that notebook since the week after her funeral. I found it in the top drawer of her bedside table. Small, blue, with a pressed flower on the cover. I opened it and read her handwriting, neat and slightly tilted, until my eyes blurred. The missing pieces were listed. Near the back, one entry described the necklace in careful, deliberate detail. My grief had transformed quietly into something else. Something purposeful and steady, like a door closing firmly behind me. The next morning, I waited until the house was completely quiet. Then I took the envelope from my shirt pocket and smoothed it open on the kitchen table. Inside was a folded receipt from Harland & Wick, dated 5 days earlier. A preliminary appraisal intake form listing items, brought in by a C. Whitmore. That was Claire's maiden name, which she still used for certain accounts. For items were described: 2 rings, 1 pendant, 1 necklace. Next to each piece, a handwritten note read condition, excellent. Beside the necklace, someone had added a starred notation, requires specialist review, unsigned but highly distinctive. May have significant provenance. My heart beat faster, but I kept my expression completely neutral. I folded the receipt back and picked up the phone. I called Harland & Wick. The man who answered had a calm, professional voice. I told him I was calling about items brought in under C. Whitmore, and that I believed those items were family property removed from my home without permission. A short pause. Then, "Mr. Whitmore, I think we need to speak in person. And I believe your son should be present when we do." I wrote the appointment time on the back of the envelope. My hand was completely steady. I had moved past the stage of shaking. I had moved quietly and entirely into the stage of being ready for whatever came next. I did not tell Michael about the appointment immediately. I needed to understand the full picture first. I also needed to know exactly what Claire had known, and when she had known it. That evening, Michael came by alone. He sat at the kitchen table and accepted a cup of coffee, looking tired and slightly guilty, the way he often did when he knew something was wrong, but hoped it might resolve without a real conversation. "She meant well," he said, without me asking. "Did she?" I replied. He wrapped both hands around his mug. "She gets frustrated that we haven't cleared things out. She thinks 2 years is long enough. That is not her decision to make," I said. He did not argue. He just nodded and stared into his coffee. I watched my son and thought about who he had been at 20, easygoing, loyal, fiercely devoted to his mother. He had loved Rose in the uncomplicated way children love parents who are consistently good to them. Claire had slowly walked him sideways from that version of himself, and he had allowed it because resistance was always harder than going along. I did not say any of this. Instead, I said, "I need you to come with me to an appointment this Friday. It involves your mother's jewelry." He looked up. "Where?" "An appraiser," I said. "I'll explain when we get there." He nodded, without pushing. I think some part of him already sensed that Friday was not going to be a comfortable day. On Thursday evening, I overheard Claire on the phone in the back hallway. I was simply taking off my shoes near the laundry room, and her voice carried clearly through the gap beneath the door. "It's just an old man being sentimental," she said, laughing softly. "He'll calm down. Michael always smooths things out." A pause. Then, the stuff was in a box in the back of the guest closet for 2 years. If it was so important, someone would have done something with it before now. Another pause. Then, I didn't touch anything labeled or in the main rooms. There's a difference. I stood very still. Then I walked to my bedroom and opened Rose's notebook to the entry describing the necklace. Rose had written, "Given to me by Aunt Harriet in 1987. She told me it was made by a craftsman in the city, but I only learned years later that the maker had a real reputation. I keep it because she loved it. If someone has it properly assessed, they may be surprised." I read those last 9 words 3 times. Then I picked up my phone and searched the craftsman's name. Rose had penciled in small letters in the margin. Easy to miss if you were not specifically looking for it. What I found made me sit back slowly in my chair and stare at the ceiling for a long, quiet time. Friday morning arrived pale and cold. I dressed carefully, pressed shirt, good jacket. The way Rose always appreciated when I made the effort for something important. Michael picked me up at 9. He was quiet in the car, glancing at me occasionally, as if trying to read what kind of morning this would be. Claire had not come. I had not expected her to. Harland and Wick was a narrow building on a respectable street, the kind of place that did not advertise loudly, because its clients already knew where to find it. A young assistant led us to a back office where a man named Mr. Harland, silver-haired and precise, with the unhurried manner of someone who handled irreplaceable things every day, was waiting at a wide wooden desk. He greeted us warmly and gestured to 2 chairs. On the desk, behind a low glass divider, 4 items lay arranged on dark velvet cloth. I recognized every one of them immediately. Michael leaned forward. "Are those Mom's pieces?" "Yes," Mr. Harland said quietly. He folded his hands. "Your wife brought these in last Monday for a general appraisal. She left no contact information, which is why I was relieved when your father called us." Michael turned to me. I said nothing. Mr. Harland cleared his throat. "Before we go further, I need to tell you both something about one of these pieces specifically. Something I believe will matter considerably to your family." Mr. Harland reached carefully for the necklace. He lifted it from the velvet and held it toward the light in a way that felt almost reverent. It was not a glamorous piece. A dark metal chain with a small pendant shaped like a leaf, with fine engraved lines running along its edges. Rose had always kept it wrapped separately. I had never seen it fully in the light before. "This piece caught the immediate attention of my senior colleague," Mr. Harland said. "It isn't signed, which is common for his earlier work. But the metalwork, the engraving technique, and the alloy composition are consistent with pieces we have previously verified." He looked at us both directly. "We believe this necklace was created by Edmund Farrow." Michael glanced at me. The name meant nothing to him yet. Edmund Farrow worked privately for roughly 12 years before his death in 1961, Mr. Harland continued. He produced fewer than 200 documented pieces in his lifetime. In the past decade, authenticated Farrow originals have sold at auction for between $60,000 and $300,000, depending on condition and provenance. He paused. "This piece is in exceptional condition." The office went completely still. Michael sat, without moving, for a long moment. When he finally turned to look at me, his expression was one I had not seen on his face since the day we buried his mother. Stunned. Completely, quietly stunned, as if the floor had shifted beneath his chair. On the drive home, Michael did not speak for the first 15 minutes. I did not push him. I watched the streets pass, and let the silence carry what it needed to carry. Finally, he said, "She thought it was costume jewelry." "Perhaps," I said. "You don't believe that?" I kept looking out the window. "I believe she entered a closet that was not hers, went through boxes she had no right to open, removed items from your mother's jewelry box, and had them appraised privately without telling either of us. Whether she fully understood what she had or not, she knew enough to take them to a professional." Michael's jaw tightened. "When I confronted her in the hallway," I continued, "she called everything old junk. But the appraiser's envelope was already in the trash bag. It had been placed there before I even walked through the door." He was quiet for a long stretch. "She told me she was just decluttering," he said finally. The sentence came out flat, as if the meaning had drained from it midway through. "I know what she told you," I said quietly. I left it there. I had learned from watching Claire for years that the most powerful thing you can do is let someone sit with the truth they are not yet ready to say aloud. You do not push. You simply wait for the moment when they can no longer avoid it. That weekend, I carefully went through every remaining shelf and box in the guest closet. Not to build a dramatic case, simply to make sure nothing further had gone missing. I photographed every remaining piece in Rose's jewelry box individually. I checked each item against her written descriptions in the blue notebook and marked them off slowly. Then I called Rose's older sister, Pauline, who lived 3 hours away and had known Rose her entire life. Pauline had visited our home many times and had sat with Rose going through the jewelry collection on more than one occasion. I asked her to come the following week. I did not explain everything, only that I needed someone who could speak to the history of certain pieces. She said without hesitation, "I'll be there Tuesday." I also went through 3 shoe boxes of old photographs that same afternoon. Rose never trusted digital. Everything was printed and labeled. I found the sapphire pendant in a photograph from our 10th anniversary dinner. I found the cameo ring in a photo from Emily's college graduation. I found the necklace in a single Christmas photograph from 1994. Rose was laughing with her head tilted back, and the leaf pendant caught the light in a way that made its shape perfectly, unmistakably clear. I printed that photograph the next morning and placed it carefully in a folder alongside everything else I had been quietly gathering. Emily called me on Sunday evening. She was my daughter, 4 years younger than Michael, and she lived far enough away to stay clear of the daily tensions in this house. But she had spoken with her brother after our Friday appointment, and she was not calling simply to pass along second-hand information. "Dad," she said, skipping any greeting, "tell me exactly what she did." I told her everything. The trash bags, the appraiser's envelope, the appointment, and what Mr. Harland had said about the necklace. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then, I knew she was planning to go through that closet. She called me 3 weeks ago, asking if I had taken anything from that room, because she was going to start organizing it. I told her not to touch Mom's things. I sat up straighter. "She called you 3 weeks ago?" "Yes." I was direct. "Do not open the jewelry box. Do not touch the boxes on the top shelf." She told me she completely understood and would not. I wrote the date on the notepad beside my chair. "Emily," I said, "I need you to write all of that down precisely. The date of the call, what you said, what you told her, and her exact response." "I already did," Emily said simply. "I figured you would need it." She had always been the one who thought ahead. Rose used to say Emily got that quality from me. I always believed she had gotten it from her mother. 2 weeks after the Friday appointment, I called Michael and Claire and invited them to dinner. I kept my voice easy and warm. I said I had been thinking things over and wanted to clear the air between us. Claire accepted without hesitation. She sounded almost relieved, which told me she believed the worst was already behind her. She had no idea Pauline had visited the house. She had no idea about Emily's written account. She had no idea that sitting in a folder on my study desk was a printed photograph of Rose wearing a necklace Mr. Harland's colleague had now formally identified as a probable Edmund Farrow original. I cooked the meal myself. Roast chicken, the kind Rose always made on Sunday evenings with garlic, lemon, and rosemary from the garden. The house smelled warm and familiar in all the right ways. Claire arrived in good spirits, walking through the front door like a woman who had already decided how the evening would end. Michael watched me carefully from the moment he stepped inside. He knew me well enough to sense when I was being deliberate. The table was set too precisely for an ordinary dinner. "Sit down," I said to them both, and I poured the wine without any hurry. We talked about simple things first: work, weather, a fence that needed repair. I let it breathe. Let the meal settle comfortably around us. Then I set down my fork, looked across the table, and said one quiet sentence. "I had a follow-up call from Mr. Harland this week," I said, keeping my voice completely even. Claire's hand paused for a fraction of a second before she reached for her wine glass. If I had not been watching closely, I would have missed it. Michael looked up. "What did he say?" "His colleague completed the full assessment on the necklace," I said. "They have now formally classified it as a probable Edmund Farrow original, pending one final verification with an auction house specialist." I paused one deliberate beat. "Their estimated value sits between $120,000 and $240,000. The number settled over the table like something solid. Michael set his fork down with careful, deliberate slowness. Claire said nothing. She was staring at her plate, and I watched the muscles along her jaw tighten and release. The ease she had carried into dinner was gone entirely. Something was replacing it that she was working hard to contain. The remaining pieces have also been fully assessed, I continued. The sapphire pendant and the cameo ring represent a significant part of this family's estate. I looked directly at Claire. I think we should have an honest conversation about how those pieces came to be in your possession, I said. Her chin lifted slightly. I didn't know they were valuable. You brought them to an appraiser, I said calmly, before putting the box they came from into the trash. Michael looked at his wife. Really looked at her. The way a person studies something familiar when they suddenly realize it may not be what they always believed. Claire, he said carefully, why did you take them to an appraiser before throwing anything away? I could see her calculating. The story she had been telling, genuine mistake, well-meaning cleanup gone wrong, required that the appraiser visit not have happened. But it had, and there was now a paper trail with her name on it. I just wanted to know what we were dealing with, she said. I wasn't going to keep anything valuable. I planned to tell you. You planned to tell me, Michael repeated. Yes. After arranging a private appraisal. It was only preliminary. You told me it was old junk, I said quietly. Those were your exact words. Standing in the hallway. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And yet 5 days before that conversation, I continued, you had already taken the pieces to a professional and received an intake note suggesting at least one piece required specialist review. The room had changed texture entirely. Michael stared at the tablecloth. When he finally looked up at Claire, something new had settled into his expression, not rage, but something equally significant. Recognition. Clear, unwelcome recognition of something he had been slow to see. I stood up and walked to my study. I returned with the folder and set it in the center of a table between the dinner plates. I opened it without ceremony. The first page was the 1994 Christmas photograph of Rose. The leaf pendant catching the light, its shape unmistakably clear. I slid it to Michael. The second page was a photocopy of Rose's notebook entry, her own handwriting, the craftsman's name penciled in the margin. I placed it beside the photograph. The third page was the appraisal intake form from Harland and Wick. Claire's maiden name at the top, the date, the starred notation about specialist review. The fourth page was Emily's written account, dated and signed, of the phone call Claire had made 3 weeks before the cleanup, during which Emily had explicitly told her not to touch the jewelry box. Claire had confirmed she understood and would not. I watched Claire's face as she looked at each page, the flush of color rising in her cheeks, her fingers pressing flat against the table edge. Michael went through each page slowly. When he reached Emily's account, he read it twice. Then he set it down quietly. You called Emily, he said. She told you not to touch the jewelry box. Claire said nothing. You agreed, he said. Still nothing. I sat back down. I did not raise my voice. Every piece of paper on that table spoke more clearly than I ever could have. Claire, I said, what you have done has moved past a misunderstanding. Taking items from someone's home, having them privately appraised under your own name without the owner's knowledge, then claiming they were discarded by accident. A lawyer would have a specific name for that. She looked up sharply. I was not stealing anything. Then why does the intake form list your name instead of mine or Michael's? I asked. Whose property did Mr. Harland believe he was assessing? She had no answer. Michael pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. He looked exhausted in a deep way, not from lack of sleep, but from realizing something he had believed was solid had been hollow underneath for a very long time. Claire, he said quietly, I need the honest version right now. Not the story, the truth. She looked at him, then at me, then at the folder. And for the first time since the hallway confrontation, the performance slipped, just slightly, showing something underneath that was both frightened and calculating at once. I thought they were going to sit in that closet forever, she said finally. I honestly thought no one was ever going to do anything with them. The sentence landed exactly as it should. It confirmed everything the folder already showed without needing another word from me. Michael stood up from the table. He did not slam his chair or raise his voice. He simply rose, picked up his wine glass, and walked to the kitchen window. He stood looking out at the dark garden with his back to both of us. Claire watched him. I watched her watch him and could see her recalibrating, measuring what he needed from her right now, whether comfort or explanation or silence. This was always her calculation. Not what was honest, only what would work. She reached toward him. "Michael, don't." One word, quiet and final. He did not turn around. Her hand fell back to the table. He turned eventually and leaned against the counter with his arms crossed. He looked at his wife with steady, tired eyes. "You went through my mother's belongings. You had her jewelry appraised under your name. You told my sister you would not touch the jewelry box, and then you did. And when my father confronted you, you called it old junk and made him feel unreasonable." Claire stared at the table. "Is there anything in that folder that is not accurate?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. He looked at me then, and the expression on his face was the one I had been waiting for, without knowing I was waiting for it. It was my son understanding, completely and without any further softening, exactly what had happened inside this house, and for exactly how long he had been looking away from it. I told them I had already scheduled a complete formal appraisal of every remaining piece in Rose's jewelry box. Not because I suspected further interference, but because I needed a fully documented official record, signed and permanently filed, of everything that remained in the estate. Claire's expression tightened. "That seems excessive." "It seems necessary," I said. "You're turning this into a legal matter." "You brought it to this level," I said quietly. "Not me." She looked at Michael. For the first time that evening, he did not meet her eyes the way she expected. He looked at the folder, then at me. "That's fair, Dad," he said. Those three simple words shifted the room in a way that could not be undone. Claire sat very still. I believe she had convinced herself, even as late as that moment, that Michael would position himself between her and the real consequences, that his loyalty to her would outlast his sense of right and wrong. But there are certain things a son cannot unsee once he has genuinely seen them. A photograph of his mother, her handwriting in a notebook, his sister's signed account of a broken promise. I poured myself a glass of water. "Mr. Harland is arranging for an auction house specialist to examine the necklace," I said. "The appointment is Thursday morning. I would like both of you to be present." Thursday arrived bright and cold. We drove to Harland and Wick in near silence. Claire sat in the back seat looking out the window. Michael drove. I sat beside him watching the streets. The specialist was a woman named Dr. Adissa from a well-regarded auction house. She was precise and unhurried, handling the necklace with the focused care of someone reading a language most people never learn. She examined it under a lighted magnifying glass for several minutes, referred to photographs on her laptop, and turned the pendant over 3 separate times. Then she looked up. "There is a secondary mark on the reverse of the pendant," she said clearly. "A small double loop impression used exclusively during Pharaoh's middle period. This piece is an authenticated original." She paused. "In current market conditions, a piece of this quality and provenance would likely achieve between $180,000 and $260,000 at auction." Mr. Harland leaned forward. "There is one additional matter." He looked directly at me. "During our full examination of the jewelry box, we discovered the box has a false bottom." I looked up at him. "Inside the hidden compartment," he said carefully, "we found a small folded document. A provenance certificate for the necklace, handwritten and personally signed by Edmund Pharaoh in the year 1958. The room went completely still. Claire's face drained of all color in a single moment, as though the news had arrived before she had time to prepare any expression for it. Claire had not known about the false bottom. None of us had known, except Rose. The notebook entry made that clear now. The careful description, the penciled craftsman's name in the margin, the sentence about being surprised. Rose had known precisely what she was keeping and had left it quietly, waiting for the right moment that her illness had prevented from arriving. Claire had come into this appointment with a manageable story still intact. She had made a mistake, The piece was valuable. Michael was upset, but it could be resolved privately. An apology, some compensation, a clean ending. The provenance certificate destroyed every dimension of that story. A handwritten, signed document from the artist himself transformed the necklace from a probable original into something with indisputable historical standing. It also meant every statement Claire had made during her initial visit to Harland and Wick was now part of a formal record permanently connected to an authenticated historical artwork. She began talking quickly, her words running ahead of her composure. She had not known about the hidden compartment. She had thought the box was decorative. She had never intended for any of this to happen. I let her finish completely without interrupting once. Then I looked calmly at Mr. Harland and asked him to please record the statement she had just made as part of the official permanent file. He nodded and began writing without looking up from his notepad. On the drive home, I sat in the back seat. I looked out at the city passing and thought about Rose. I thought about her laughing in that 1994 Christmas photograph, unaware she was wearing something extraordinary. I thought about the blue notebook with the pressed flower on the cover and the handwriting that grew slightly shakier near the bottom of each page. She had known about the necklace. She had known about the provenance certificate. She had left both exactly where they were, in quiet confidence that someone would find them when the moment was right. We arrived home. Michael turned off the engine. None of us moved for a moment. Then Michael turned around in his seat to face us both. "Claire," he said, "I need you to be honest with me. Not with Dad, not with Mr. Harland. With me." She looked at him. "Did you have any real idea what you were doing when you took those pieces from that closet?" The question sat between them like something made of glass. It required a true answer, and every person in that car understood it. Claire looked down at her hands. "I thought they might be worth something," she said quietly. "I just didn't think anyone would actually check." Michael nodded slowly, the nod of a man receiving confirmation he had already quietly prepared himself for. "That," he said, "is exactly the problem." That evening, Michael called Mr. Harland on speakerphone at the kitchen table. I sat across from them. Claire sat to Michael's left, her hands flat and still on the table. Michael asked Mr. Harland to confirm the full situation, the authentication, the assessed value, and the formal standing of the provenance certificate. Mr. Harland was thorough. He confirmed the necklace was fully authenticated. He confirmed the provenance certificate had been sent to a conservator for protective archiving. He confirmed that the entire appraisal record, including the original intake form filed under Claire's name, all session notes, and every finding, was now part of Harland and Wick's permanent official file. Then Michael asked the question I had been waiting for him to ask entirely on his own. "Mr. Harland, given the circumstances under which these items came to your office, is there anything your firm would be professionally obligated to flag?" A brief pause. "We are not investigators," Mr. Harland said carefully. "However, our intake process is legally documented, and the current ownership of estate items is something we take seriously. Any dispute over who legitimately possesses items being appraised is something we would strongly recommend resolving through qualified legal counsel." Claire stared at the center of the table. "I understand," Michael said. "Thank you." He ended the call. He looked at Claire, then at me. "She will return all pieces, and she will compensate at full appraised value for anything that cannot be recovered." What followed was not dramatic. There were no more confrontations across dinner tables, no raised voices, no scenes in front of witnesses. The resolution came the way real resolutions often do, quietly, through lawyers, written agreements, and the slow, uncomfortable weight of genuine accountability. Claire returned the pieces she had taken to Harland and Wick for official redocumentation. Michael arranged for Rose's full jewelry estate to be formally cataloged and placed into a trust fund established in her name, with written instructions for how each piece would eventually pass to Emily and to Michael himself. Claire had no role in that process. She did not fight any part of it. I believe the moment in the car, when Michael said that is exactly the problem, had been the true turning point more than any document or dollar amount. That was when she understood her husband had seen past the story she had built, had chosen honesty over comfort, and that this time the truth was not going to be quietly buried to keep the peace. Michael apologized to me separately. He sat at the kitchen table one evening with just the two of us, no performance, no shortcuts. He said he had not seen what he should have seen much sooner. He said he had been choosing comfort over clarity for too long. I told him I already knew. And I told him I was proud of the man he had chosen to be when it had finally, truly mattered. 3 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, I visited Rose's grave as I always did. I brought white freesias, her favorite. I stayed for 20 minutes and talked to her the way I always had, quietly, honestly, without any performance. I told her about the necklace, about Edmund Farrow, about the provenance certificate folded inside the false bottom of her oak jewelry box. I told her about Dr. Adissa holding the pendant up to the light, turning it slowly, reading something in the metal that the rest of us could not quite see. I told her I believed she had always known exactly what she was keeping and exactly why she had left it there. Back at the house that evening, I sat in the cedar-smelling study with a blue notebook open on the desk. I read the last entry describing the necklace in careful detail. At the very bottom, in slightly lighter ink, as if added on a different day, "Whoever finds this, take good care of it. It was made with love, and I have kept it with love, and that is exactly enough." I closed the notebook gently. I set it on the shelf beside the empty jewelry box. The brass latch caught the evening light for one quiet moment. Then the room went still. Rose was gone. The necklace was safe. Her estate was protected. Her story would be told correctly now, on her terms, by the people who had always loved her honestly. On the windowsill, a small candle I had lit before sitting down held its flame steady. So did I.